Well, here we go. We're going to take a little trip out into the CRP that we burned this spring. And of course, look at all the visitors. We got to have passengers here. They want to ride too. What do you think there, Chigger? While we drive out to the CRP, I should probably tell people that don't know exactly what CRP stands for. It's an acronym that stands for Conservation Reserve Program, and it's a federal program by which the U.S. Department of Agriculture cost shares with landowners to establish various forms of conservation, including grasslands, prairie, wetlands, riparian buffers, and more. This particular CRP planting is owned by my Aunt Deb, who owns the farmland around Hazel Acres. A true conservationist, my Aunt Deb. Anyway, she has her brother Roger manage the farm, including the CRP acres. And this year, part of that management was a prescribed burn. Now we'll need to go back to this spring to get a peek at what that process was like. Today is the day. It's late April, and although the wind is not ideal, it's certainly manageable, so we're burning the CRP. You can see how thick it is. So there appears to be plenty of material to carry the burn all the way through. So our job is going to keep the fire from spreading to the south part of the drainage ditch. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our firefighting rig. The old Alice Chalmers and a 500-gallon water tank. Well, let's get to it. The water tank provides us the water to control the fire and steer it where we want it to go. To start the fire and then keep the burn even, we put a little diesel fuel in a pump sprayer to aid things and allow us to manipulate the fire line and be sure we get a steady burn. You'll notice the prevailing wind and that we are burning into that prevailing wind. Here is roughly 30 minutes of burn time condensed down to just a couple of minutes. You can see how far the fire progresses in that time. It's going to be a long night, but we can't leave the burn until the fire is completely out. Last night was a late one. We finally got the fire put out for good and properly doused with water around, I'd say midnight or so. And this is what it looks like this morning. We're really pleased with how well it turned out. Only a handful of spots where there wasn't enough material to keep the fire going. But overall, a very thorough prairie burn. And I'll be excited to see what this looks like come this summer and fall. So we're taking a drive through the prairie, and I never in 100 years would have thought that this area would have turned out like this. Completely covered and dominated by Maximilian Sunflower. So when talking to folks who really know prairie, I've often heard them say that prairie is so much fun because you never know what species may dominate from one year to the next. So the first year it might be the Monarda, Maybe the next year it could be purple prairie clover. Last year on my little strip of prairie in the hazelnut orchard, the compass plant seemed to dominate for me. You know, it really is a surprise, and that's what makes prairie so neat. Well, we are here at Hazel Acres, and oh my goodness gracious, would you look at this. So this is an area that we burned this spring, and look at the response. Absolutely gorgeous. Unbelievable. Well, we're not the only ones excited to see the prairie. Jack seems to think it's time to run and see what he can find hiding out in the tall grass and forbs of the prairie. I think we're going to have Roger go stand next to a clump of the sunflower so folks can get a sense of the size and scale. From this burned and charred landscape back in April to a sea of Maximilian sunflower, Indian grass, switchgrass, and more in less than 6 months. That is the grandeur of Mother Nature, and one of the many things that make country living so fulfilling. Well, that's going to wrap it up. I think Joyce has some supper, so we better be getting back up to the house. You know, this has been a short drive to visit my Aunt Deb's prairie that we burned in the spring of 2021, and we just want to thank Deb for making space on the farm for habitat for all sorts of creatures, from pheasants and songbirds to pollinators like bees and butterflies. You know, it benefits us all in one way or another. Well, that's going to do it from Hazel Acres. We'll see you next time. Please like, share, and subscribe.